Episode 3. The Beggar, King of Dragons. When the first flame opened its eyes beneath Rome, the city did not sleep for 3 nights. Cracks split the marble roads. Temple bells rang without hands. Smoke rose from the forum, and every statue of the old gods looked down as if judgment had finally returned. Emperor Lucan called it a disaster. Magister Ver called it treason. But in the alleys of the Subura, where poor families slept under broken roofs and ate whatever the markets threw away, the people called it something else. A sign among them lived a boy named Kael. He had no family name, no sandals worth stealing, and no place at any table. He carried coal for bathhouses, cleaned blood from arena wagons, and slept behind a baker's wall with rats and ashes for company. To the nobles, he was gutter-born. To the soldiers, he was invisible. To the young dragon mages, he was a joke they could kick aside whenever they wished. Kael had learned to bow before people who were weaker than him, simply because they were rich. On the 4th morning after Kaelith rose, the imperial square filled with crowds. Lucan had ordered every citizen to witness the punishment of the rebels. He stood on a golden platform with Ver at his side, surrounded by bronze-masked mages, senators in white, and noble boys who laughed behind jeweled hands. At the edge of the crowd, Kael watched barefoot in the dust. He did not come for the emperor. He came because, chained beneath the platform, he saw a baby red dragon. It was no larger than a hound, with torn wings, bleeding claws, and a muzzle locked shut by iron runes. The nobles threw stones at it to prove they were brave. The dragon did not roar. It only trembled. Kael stepped forward. A noble boy named Varro saw him and smiled. Varro had mocked him for years, calling him ashrat, gutter dog, nothing born. Now he shoved Kael into the square and shouted for everyone to look. The crowd laughed. Soldiers laughed. Even some of the young mages laughed. Kael fell beside the chained dragon. The little beast opened one golden eye. Kael did not know magic. He did not know prayers. He only knew pain when he saw it. So he put his dirty hands on the iron muzzle and whispered, "You are not a monster." The rune cracked. Silence fell over Rome. Ver turned first, his cracked bronze mask tilted like a blade. He ordered Kael dragged away, but the guards stopped after one step. The sky had gone dark, not with clouds, but with wings. Morvath circled above the forum. Kaelith's white shadow crossed the temples. The small silver dragon landed on a broken statue, watching the boy, as if it already knew his name. Then the temple doors opened by themselves. From within came golden light, and in that light stood the shapes of the old gods. Jupiter with storm in his eyes, Minerva with a spear of silver flame, Vulcan with hands of molten iron. They did not look at Lucan. They did not look at the senators. They looked at Kael, barefoot in dust, kneeling beside a wounded dragon. Ver shouted that gods did not choose beggars. The sky answered with thunder. The baby dragon's chain shattered. Fire burst from the ground around Kael in a perfect circle, but it did not burn him. Instead, the ash on his skin became gold. A crown-shaped mark appeared across his chest, bright as sunrise through smoke. Jupiter's voice rolled over the square. The one with nothing to own is the one who cannot be bought. Minerva's voice followed. The one mocked by kings will know the weight of justice. Then Vulcan raised his burning hand. Let the dragons answer their true king. Every dragon in Rome cried out. Morvath dropped from the sky like a falling mountain. Soldiers scattered. Kaelith descended in white fire, and the crowd collapsed to its knees. The red hatchling climbed behind Kael and pressed its head against his back. Kael stood slowly, no longer shaking. Ver attacked. Silver binding runes erupted from his arms and whipped toward Kael like chains made of lightning. Kael lifted one hand. He did not speak a spell. He did not command through pain. He simply opened his palm, and the magic broke apart, as if it had struck a wall older than Rome. For the first time, Ver stepped back. Lucan ordered the legions forward, shields locked. spears lowered, war drums shook the forum. The noble boys cheered until Morvath roared, and their voices died in their throats. Kael walked into the center of the square. The poor boy they had spit on raised his burned gold hand, and the dragons moved as one. Storm drakes spiraled down from the clouds and struck the legions with lightning that shattered shields but spared flesh. Sandworms burst from the streets and swallowed siege towers into dust. Bone-white dragons circled the palace and tore the imperial banners from their poles. Kaelith spread its wings, and every collar in Rome cracked open at once. The Empire's dragon magic died screaming. Veyr tried to flee into the temple, but Kael called Morvath without a word. The Cinder King landed before the mage, jaws burning white. Veyr raised both hands, begging to be spared by the creature he had tortured for years. Morvath did not kill him. He lowered his head, and Kael stepped past him. "You taught the world to kneel through fear," Kael said. "Now you will kneel because fear has failed." Veyr fell to his knees. Varro tried to run next. The noble boy who had called Kael Nothing-born stumbled through the dust, crying for guards who no longer obeyed. The red hatchling blocked his path. Varro fell backward, shaking, his fine robes covered in ash. Around him the other nobles dropped their jewels and crawled away from the boy they had laughed at. Kael looked at them all. Senators, mages, soldiers, nobles, and the emperor himself. Lucan drew a ceremonial sword. His hand trembled. He charged anyway, desperate to keep the crown history had already taken from him. Kael did not move. Kaelith breathed once, and the emperor's sword melted into silver rain before it reached him. Lucan fell, not dead, defeated. The square was silent, except for dragon wings and broken chains. Kael walked to the golden platform. Every step he took left a mark of fire in the dust. He did not sit on Lucan's throne. He broke it in half and let the pieces fall. Then he turned to the people of the Subura, the slaves of the arena, the servants, the hungry children, the nameless and the mocked. No one born in the dust will bow to a collar again. The poor rose first, then the soldiers, then the mages, the senators, and every noble who had laughed at him. At last, Emperor Lucan lowered his head. Magister Veyr pressed his cracked mask to the ground. Varro wept in the ashes. Before them stood Kael, the beggar boy, chosen by gods, crowned by dragons, stronger than every throne that had ever crushed him. Rome had lost an emperor, and the dragons had found their king. Episode 2. The catacombs of Ash by Dawn. Rome had become a locked tomb. The city gates were sealed, the marble streets were empty, and every rooftop carried the shadow of a dragon hunter. The emperor had turned the capital into a cage, but beneath the gold and stone, Aurelia, Vale was running through darkness, with Morvath, the Cinder King, behind her, Cassian at her side, and the small silver dragon limping through the ash. No one in the arena had expected the rebellion to survive the night. No one had expected a servant girl to break a dragon's collar and walk out alive. But the moment Morvath roared over the Colosseum, the empire changed. Emperor Lucan ordered the gates closed. Magister Veyr ordered the hunt, and Rome, proud and ancient, began to hunt its own legend. Cassian knew the old tunnels beneath the arena. He led them through a narrow service passage where the stone still smelled of smoke and old blood. Aurelia kept one hand on the wall and one hand over the glowing mark in her palm. The silver dragon moved close behind her, its bent wing scraping dust from the floor. Morvath could barely fit through the passage, but he followed anyway, his obsidian scales catching the torchlight like pieces of a broken night. Above them, soldiers thundered across the streets. Below them, the city opened into catacombs older than the empire itself. The air turned cold, the walls changed, and suddenly, Aurelia was standing before carvings of dragons and kings, of hands raised in peace, of fire shared instead of chained. Her mark burned. The first mural showed a dragon kneeling before a human. The second showed a human kneeling before a dragon. The third showed both together, not as master and beast, but as heirs to the same flame. Cassian stared at the stone and went quiet. He told Aurelia he had seen the old war, the one the Empire erased. He had watched cities burn when men forgot that dragons were never born to kneel. Then the hunters came. Magister Vare had sent bronze-masked soldiers down into the underworld, each one carrying iron collars and silver chains, their lanterns sliced through the dark like knives. Their footsteps echoed through the tunnels, and the silence of the catacombs became a trap closing around them. Morvath stepped forward, first, his ember eyes glowing brighter with every breath. One blast of white fire turned a corridor into a wall of flame and smoke, and the hunters staggered back in fear. Cassian held the rear gate with shield and spear, blocking the narrow stair, while Aurelia and the silver dragon moved deeper into the maze. The old gladiator looked smaller in the torchlight, but his hands were steady. He had spent a lifetime fighting for emperors. Now he was fighting for the first thing that ever felt true. The tunnels opened into an underground river beneath Rome, black water sliding between stone pillars carved with dragon claws. Reflections trembled on the surface. Morvath's ember eyes, the silver dragon's pale scales, Aurelia's glowing palm. On the far side of the river, half hidden behind collapsed masonry, the silver dragon found a secret door. When Aurelia touched it, the stone answered with a deep sound, like a heartbeat waking from sleep. Beyond the door was the vault beneath the forum, a chamber sealed by black glass and iron chains. At its center stood an altar older than the Empire, wrapped in tablets covered with the language of the first dragon mages. Aurelia stepped toward it, as if pulled by a dream she had never lived. The mark in her palm flared gold. The walls lit one by one, and the room filled with the sound of ancient wings. Magister Vare arrived at the entrance just in time to see the light. His bronze mask was cracked now, his silver runes unstable, his patience gone. He ordered the hunters forward. Cassian met them in the doorway and fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. Morvath answered with fire, the silver dragon with teeth and speed. And the whole chamber shook with the violence of the Empire, trying to force its way into an old memory. Aurelia reached the altar. Beneath the stone lay a relic shaped like a crown of ash and gold. The moment her fingers touched it, the sealed wall behind the altar cracked open. One white eye opened in the dark, then another. Kael, the first flame, had been sleeping beneath Rome for centuries, chained in silence beneath the bones of the city. The ancient dragon woke slowly, like sunrise after 1,000 years. White scales unfolded from shadow, wings wide as temple roofs filled the vault. The chains snapped one after another, each break shaking dust from the ceiling. Kael lifted its head and looked at Aurelia not with hunger, but with recognition, as if the world had finally remembered her name. Vare shouted for the hunters to bind it. His magic broke against the first breath of the first flame and scattered through the chamber like shattered glass. Above them, Rome trembled. The ceiling cracked, thin lines of daylight slipped through the stone, and in that blazing white glow, Morvath and Kael stood side by side, black fire and white fire reflecting in the same broken vault. Aurelia stepped between them, her burned hand glowing with the ash crown mark, and for the first time she understood what the Empire had feared. She was not a rider, she was not a prisoner. She was the heir of a covenant older than Rome, older than crowns, older than the lies that built the city. Far above them, Emperor Lucan looked out over the sealed capital and saw dragons rising from the earth. The skies were filling with wings. The war had moved out of the arena and into the world, And beneath the city that had tried to bury its past, the first flame had opened its eyes. Rome had opened the grave of the first dragon, and the grave had opened its eyes.